In the year 2000, two men flew to Dallas for the most important meeting of their lives. They ran a small, money-losing startup with a strange idea: renting movies by mail, no late fees, delivered to your door. They were drowning in costs, and they had come to make a deal. They walked into the headquarters of Blockbuster, the undisputed king of home entertainment, 9,000 stores, billions in revenue, a brand so dominant that "let's get a Blockbuster" simply meant "let's watch a movie." And they offered to sell their entire company to Blockbuster for $50 million. By most accounts, they were nearly laughed out of the room. Why would the most powerful video empire on the planet pay $50 million for a tiny mail-order business that was bleeding cash? It was absurd. The meeting ended. The offer was declined. That startup was Netflix. And in that one room, in that one decision, the entire future of how the world would watch movies was quietly decided, just not in the way anyone in that building believed. To understand how blind that decision was, you have to understand just how enormous Blockbuster truly was. For an entire generation, the Friday night ritual was sacred. You drove to the Blockbuster. You walked the aisles under that bright blue and yellow light, past the towering wall of new releases, hoping the copy you wanted wasn't already gone. You grabbed some overpriced candy. And you walked out with a stack of tapes and a date by which they had to be back. At its peak, Blockbuster was a genuine empire. Thousands of stores across the world. Tens of thousands of employees. A new store opening, at one point, almost every single day. It didn't just dominate the market, it was the market. Movie studios scheduled their releases around it. If your film didn't get a good placement on the Blockbuster shelf, it might as well not exist. This was a company that looked completely, permanently untouchable. It had the locations, the brand, the studio relationships, and the cash. It was the kind of giant that everyone assumed would simply exist forever, the way the sun comes up. But hidden inside that empire was a single idea, the thing that made it so profitable, and that same idea was a crack running straight through the foundation. Here is the uncomfortable secret at the heart of Blockbuster's success: a staggering portion of its profit didn't come from renting you movies. It came from punishing you for bringing them back late. Late fees. Those dreaded late fees. Forget to return a tape by the due date, and the charges started stacking up, sometimes ending up costing more than just buying the movie outright. Customers hated them. They were a constant, low-grade source of resentment, the thing everyone complained about. And yet, by many estimates, late fees made up a massive chunk of Blockbuster's profits. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year, built entirely on customer frustration. Think about what that means. The company's profitability was directly tied to annoying its own customers. The worse the experience, the more you forgot, the more you got charged, the more money they made. It was a business model that quietly bet against the very people it served. And this is the part that matters most. That toxic, brilliant little engine wasn't just a flaw Blockbuster tolerated. It became the thing they could not give up. When the future came knocking, the late fee was the chain that held them in the past, because letting go of it meant letting go of the money that made the whole machine run. Now look at what Netflix was actually offering in that Dallas meeting, because it was aimed like a missile at Blockbuster's biggest weakness. The Netflix pitch was simple and devastating. No stores. No driving. No browsing a shelf where the movie you wanted was always out of stock. You built a list online, and the DVDs arrived in your mailbox in those iconic red envelopes. You kept them as long as you wanted. You sent them back when you were done. And this was the dagger: there were no late fees. Ever. They had looked at the single thing Blockbuster's customers hated the most, the resentment baked into every transaction, and built an entire company around erasing it. There's a famous origin story here, and whether or not every detail is literally true, it captures the whole thing perfectly. The legend goes that one of Netflix's founders got the idea after being hit with a roughly $40 late fee on a single rented movie and walking out furious, thinking there had to be a better way. True or polished, that story tells you exactly where Netflix was aiming. Their entire pitch was, in essence, we are the company that will never make you feel what you just felt at Blockbuster. They weren't selling movies. They were selling the end of that specific humiliation. But in the year 2000, the idea looked fragile. The internet was slow. DVDs by mail felt like a niche hobby. Netflix was losing money, and Blockbuster had every reason to believe this was a minor irritation, not a threat. Why buy the small, struggling company solving a problem you didn't even think you had? So they passed. And for a few years, it even looked like the right call. The mistake wasn't failing to see the future perfectly. The mistake was being so in love with the late fee that they couldn't imagine a world without it. And here is the cruelest twist in the whole story. Blockbuster did, eventually, see it. Someone inside the building understood exactly what was happening. A few years after that meeting, with new leadership, Blockbuster actually launched its own online, buy-mail service. They had the brand, the stores, and the resources to crush Netflix, to offer the same convenience plus the ability to drop off and pick up at a physical location, something Netflix could never match. For a moment, there was a real plan to fight back, to combine the empire's physical power with the startup's digital model. They even moved to kill the hated late fees. But fighting the future is expensive. The new strategy cost a fortune and ate into those precious short-term profits. And the people who owned and controlled the company looked at the falling numbers, looked at the cost of transformation, and flinched. There was a brutal internal war over direction. The leadership pushing to reinvent the company was forced out. The strategy was gutted. They retreated back to the safety of what had always worked, the stores, and yes, the late fees. They had the map to the future in their hands. And they chose, deliberately, to put it down. After that, the end came with shocking speed. The technology Blockbuster kept betting against didn't just improve, it exploded. Internet speeds got fast enough to stream video directly. Netflix, the company they'd laughed at, pivoted brilliantly from mailing DVDs to streaming everything instantly, building the future Blockbuster had refused to build. There was suddenly no tape to return, no store to drive to, no late fee to fear. The entire reason Blockbuster existed was evaporating. The empire that had opened a store almost every day began closing them just as fast. Thousands of locations went dark. The towering walls of new releases were liquidated. The revenue that had seemed eternal collapsed, and the debt the company had taken on caught up with it all at once. And debt is the quiet killer in almost every story like this. Blockbuster wasn't just a brand and a pile of stores, it was carrying a heavy load of borrowed money, the kind a giant can service easily when the cash is flowing and that becomes a noose the moment it isn't. Every shuttered store still had a lease to pay. Every empty shelf was overhead with no income behind it. When the customers migrated to streaming, the revenue didn't decline gently, it fell off a cliff, while the costs and the debt stayed exactly where they were. A company that looks invincible on the way up can come apart astonishingly fast on the way down, because the very size that made it mighty becomes dead weight the instant the money stops. In 2010, just 10 years after that meeting in Dallas, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. The untouchable giant, the company studios once bent over backwards to please, was finished. And Netflix, the tiny startup they could have bought for $50 million, went on to be worth, at its heights, hundreds of billions. The numbers are almost too cruel to be real. A $50 million mistake that turned into a $100 billion lesson. For years afterward, a single Blockbuster store kept its lights on, in a town in Oregon, the last one on Earth. People made pilgrimages to it, took photos under the blue and yellow sign, and felt that strange ache of nostalgia for the Friday night ritual that the internet had quietly erased. That lone store is the perfect monument to what happened. Not a dramatic explosion, not a single fatal disaster, just a giant that was so comfortable, so addicted to the way things had always worked, that it could not move when the ground shifted beneath it. Because that's the real lesson of Blockbuster, and it's why the story still stings. They weren't destroyed by a competitor they couldn't see. They were destroyed by a competitor they looked directly at, held in their hands, and dismissed. The threat sat in their boardroom and offered to join them for $50 million, and they laughed. Every empire believes the thing that made it rich will keep it rich forever. Blockbuster believed it right up to the moment the lights went out. So tell me, down in the comments, what's a company you think is making the exact same mistake right now, in love with an old idea while the future knocks on the door? And if this one got you, the video on screen breaks down another giant that was voted the most innovative company in America right before it completely collapsed. Go watch it.